A farmer's daughter will never thrive at Glenwood University. Students like her lack the academic foundation to succeed in our elite environment. The admissions director's cruel dismissal still echoed in Maya's ears when the very next morning, 3 black SUVs with the governor's flag flying proudly rolled up the dusty driveway to their family farm. Her father dropped his pitchfork in shock as men in suits emerged, followed by a woman whose face was regularly featured on the evening news. "We're here about Maya Wilson's university application," the governor's chief of staff announced, her voice carrying across the field. "And we'd like to discuss Glenwood's admissions practices. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." Silver Creek Farm stretched across 40 acres of fertile valley land, nestled between rolling hills that turned golden in the autumn sun. For generations, the Wilson family had worked this land with a combination of traditional knowledge and innovative agricultural practices that made their organic produce sought after throughout the state. Though modest in appearance with its weathered red barn and century-old farmhouse, Silver Creek was a model of sustainable farming that quietly defied conventional agribusiness models. Maya Wilson had grown up with soil under her fingernails and scientific journals on her nightstand. At 18, her bedroom walls displayed both ribbons from agricultural fairs and academic certificates that testified to her unusual combination of practical farming experience and scientific brilliance. Her science projects on soil microbiome enhancement had won regional competitions 3 years running, though few at those competitions realized she was testing her theories on actual crops at her family's farm. When not helping with farm operations, Maya could be found in her makeshift laboratory, a converted tool shed where second-hand equipment purchased from university surplus sales sat alongside handcrafted devices of her own design. Here she meticulously documented her experiments on sustainable pest management and soil enrichment techniques that had increased their farm's yield by 30%, while reducing chemical inputs to near zero. Maya's father, Thomas Wilson, had encouraged her scientific curiosity from an early age, never subscribing to the notion that farm girls should have limited horizons. A voracious reader himself, he had filled their home with books on everything, from classical literature to cutting-edge agricultural science. Her mother, Eleanor, a former high school biology teacher who had embraced farm life when she married Thomas, had homeschooled Maya until high school, providing a rigorous education that far exceeded state requirements. "Knowledge isn't just for people in ivory towers," Thomas often told Maya. "It's for anyone willing to get their hands dirty with both work and learning." This philosophy had shaped Maya's approach to education. Theoretical knowledge tested through practical application, academic concepts brought to life in the fields and greenhouse of Silver Creek Farm. It was an approach that had served her well throughout high school, where she had graduated as valedictorian, despite the occasional raised eyebrows from teachers unused to a farmer's daughter with such academic prowess. Glenwood University represented the logical next step in Maya's educational journey. The prestigious institution boasted the state's premier agricultural science program, with research facilities that made Maya's converted tool shed look as primitive as stone tools. Their work on sustainable agriculture, though largely theoretical, aligned perfectly with Maya's hands-on experience. The complementary nature of their approach and hers seemed obvious to everyone who knew Maya's work. Everyone, it seemed, except Glenwood's admissions committee. Director of Admissions Richard Hargrove had built his reputation on maintaining Glenwood's exclusivity at 58, with silver hair and tailored suits that emphasized his distance from the working-class backgrounds of many state residents. He viewed himself as the gatekeeper of standards at an institution increasingly pressured to broaden its demographics. His office, with its mahogany desk and walls lined with degrees and photographs of himself alongside various dignitaries, served as the setting for many dreams, either launched or destroyed. Glenwood University isn't just about academic metrics, he frequently explained to parents. It's about cultural fit, about students who will represent our traditions and values in their future careers. This unwritten criterion had become Hargrove's most effective tool for maintaining what he privately considered the right balance in Glenwood's student body. Test scores and grades could be argued with. Cultural fit was conveniently subjective. It was this criterion that brought Maya Wilson, despite her perfect grades and exceptional test scores, to Hargrove's office on a crisp autumn morning. Her acceptance letter to Glenwood's agricultural sciences program, clutched in hands, still calloused from harvest work. "Miss Wilson," Hargrove began, his voice pleasant but distant as he gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Thank you for coming in today. I understand you had some questions about your residential assignment." Maya nodded, straightening her posture in the uncomfortable chair. She had chosen her outfit carefully, a simple blouse and skirt that had seemed appropriate when she laid them out at home, but now felt hopelessly casual compared to Hargrove's tailored perfection. "Yes, sir. The housing letter assigned me to East Meadow Hall, but my acceptance to the Agricultural Sciences Honors Program mentioned I'd be placed in Westfield Hall with the other program students. I wanted to make sure there wasn't a mistake." Hargrove's smile tightened almost imperceptibly as he pulled a folder from the stack on his desk. "Ah, yes. I've reviewed your situation, and there's been a slight adjustment to your admission status." He paused, studying her with a calculating gaze. "While your academic qualifications are certainly adequate, the honors program requires a certain profile that extends beyond metrics." Maya's brow furrowed. "I don't understand. My acceptance letter specifically mentioned the honors program. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe. And to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story." "Yes, that was an unfortunate clerical error," Hargrove replied smoothly. "The committee had provisionally approved your application pending a final review, which has since been completed. You've been accepted to the Standard Agricultural Sciences program, which is still quite an achievement for someone with your background." The emphasis he placed on your background sent a chill through Maya. "My background? I'm not sure what. You mean?" Hargrove leaned back, steepling his fingers. "Miss Wilson, Glenwood's Agricultural Sciences Honors Program prepares students for leadership positions in policy and corporate agricultural development. Our experience suggests that students from more conventional academic paths integrate more successfully into these trajectories." Maya felt her cheeks flush. "You mean students who haven't actually worked on farms?" "I've been applying agricultural science in real-world conditions my entire life. My soil remediation project won the State Innovation Award last year." "Yes, I recall the local news coverage," Hargrove said with a dismissive wave. "Practical experience certainly has its place. However, the honors program emphasizes theoretical frameworks and policy development approaches that typically align with students from more traditional preparatory backgrounds." His condescension sparked something in Maya, not just indignation for herself, but for every student who had faced such thinly veiled prejudice. "My non-traditional background is precisely why my research has practical applications that most undergraduates can't match. Director Hargrove, I earned that honors program spot." Hargrove's expression hardened. "Miss Wilson, while I appreciate your enthusiasm, I should remind you that admission decisions are final. The standard program is still an opportunity many would be grateful for. If you feel Glenwood isn't the right fit given this adjustment, you're welcome to explore other options." The implied threat hung in the air. Accept the demotion or walk away entirely. Maya sat very still, processing the injustice of a decision so clearly based on where she came from rather than what she had achieved. "Is there an appeals process?" she asked finally, her voice steadier than she felt. Hargrove's smile was cold. "The committee's decision was unanimous. I suggest you focus on making the most of the opportunity you've been given rather than dwelling on unrealistic expectations." He glanced at his watch. "Now, if there's nothing else, I have other appointments waiting." As Maya rose to leave, Hargrove added in a tone of practiced concern, "You might find the transition to university life challenging enough without the additional pressures of the honors program. Sometimes these adjustments are really for the best, especially for students from rural backgrounds." The words hit Maya like a physical blow. Outside Hargrove's office, she paused in the ornate hallway, surrounded by portraits of Glenwood's distinguished alumni, none of whom, she noticed, looked like they had ever set foot on a working farm. The prestigious university that had seemed like her perfect next step suddenly felt as unwelcoming as foreign soil, hostile to growth. That evening, the Wilson family kitchen became a council of war. Thomas and Eleanor listened intently as Maya recounted her meeting with Director Hargrove, their expressions shifting from concern to indignation. "He all but said, 'I don't belong there because I'm a farmer's daughter,'" Maya concluded, pushing her barely touched dinner around her plate. "Apparently, my rural background makes me unsuitable for leadership in agricultural policy. You know, the thing our family has been, living and breathing for generations." Thomas Wilson's weathered face flushed with anger. "That's discrimination, plain and simple. Your work stands on its own merits. Any program would be lucky to have you." Eleanor, always the strategist of the family, was already thinking ahead. "The question is what to do now. Maya, do you still want to attend Glenwood if this is their attitude?" Maya stared out the kitchen window at the fields where her experiments had flourished. "Part of me wants to walk away, to find a university that values what I bring to the table. But another part feels like that's letting Hargrove win, confirming his belief that people like us don't belong in places like Glenwood." Thomas reached across the table to squeeze his daughter's hand. "This isn't just about you anymore, Maya. It's about every farm kid who deserves a fair shot based on their abilities, not their address." The kitchen fell silent as the family considered their options. Maya's younger brother, Ethan, who had been quietly listening from the doorway, suddenly spoke up. "What about Dr. Garcia? Doesn't she work at Glenwood now?" Maya looked up sharply. "Dr. Elena Garcia, my 4-H scientific advisor?" Eleanor's eyes widened with recognition. "Ethan's right. Elena accepted a position as Glenwood's Director of Agricultural Innovation last year. She was your biggest advocate during the state competitions. And," Thomas added, his expression brightening, "she serves on the Governor's Agricultural Development Committee. She'd understand exactly what Hargrove is doing." For the first time since leaving Hargrove's office, Maya felt a flicker of hope. Dr. Garcia had been the first person outside her family to recognize her scientific potential, mentoring her through increasingly sophisticated research projects since she was 14. If anyone could help navigate this situation, it would be her. "I'll email her tonight," Maya decided, straightening in her chair. "The worst she can say is that there's nothing she can do." Eleanor nodded approvingly. "And tomorrow, I'm calling the State Educational Opportunity Office. If Glenwood is systematically disadvantaging rural students while taking state funding, they should know about it." As the family continued planning their response, none of them could have anticipated how quickly events would unfold, or that within 24 hours, the quiet driveway of Silver Creek Farm would be lined with black SUVs bearing the governor's official flag. That night, Maya drafted a careful email to Dr. Garcia, focusing on the facts of her situation rather than emotional appeals. She attached her original application materials acceptance letter to the honors program, and subsequent reassignment notice, along with notes from her meeting with Director Hargrove that documented his comments about her rural background. After sending the email, Maya sat at her desk, gazing at the model of Glenwood's agricultural research center she had built after receiving her initial acceptance. The detailed miniature represented hours of work and months of dreams. With a decisive motion, she covered it with a cloth. Until this situation resolved, she couldn't bear to look at the symbol of an institution that had judged her worthy on paper, but lacking in person. Meanwhile, in her office at Glenwood University, Dr. Elena Garcia was working late, reviewing proposals for the upcoming Agricultural Innovation Symposium. When Maya's email arrived, she opened it immediately, recognizing the name of her former protégé. As she read through the attached documents, her expression shifted from curiosity to concern to outright indignation. Dr. Garcia had spent her career breaking barriers. Born to migrant farm workers, she had fought her way through academia with brilliant research on sustainable agriculture techniques, eventually earning a position at Glenwood despite the institution's historical resistance to faculty from non-traditional backgrounds. She understood exactly what Maya was facing, and she recognized the pattern in Hargrove's behavior. Without hesitation, she picked up her phone and made a call to Governor Elaine Woodward. The two women had developed a close working relationship through the Agricultural Development Committee, united by their shared vision of modernizing the state's farming industry while supporting rural communities. Elaine, it's Elena Garcia. I apologize for calling this late, but I've just uncovered something at Glenwood that requires immediate attention, and it may connect to the issues we've been discussing about rural educational access. On the other end of the line, Governor Woodward listened carefully as Dr. Garcia outlined Maya's situation, connecting it to broader patterns of discrimination against rural students in elite academic programs. The governor's interest sharpened when Dr. Garcia mentioned Maya's innovative soil remediation technique. Wait, is this the same Maya Wilson whose microbiome enrichment process was featured in the State Agricultural Bulletin? The one that increased yield while reducing fertilizer requirements by 60%? The very same, Dr. Garcia confirmed. She developed that process in a converted tool shed on her family's farm with equipment she either built herself or salvaged from university. Surplus sales. Imagine what she could do with proper research facilities. Governor Woodward was silent for a moment, thinking. Her administration had been developing a major initiative on sustainable agriculture and rural economic development, scheduled for announcement later that month. Maya Wilson's situation presented not just a problem to solve, but an opportunity to highlight exactly the kind of innovation and talent the initiative aimed to support. Send me everything you have on Maya Wilson and this situation at Glenwood, the governor decided, and keep tomorrow morning clear on your calendar. I think it's time we paid a visit to Silver Creek Farm and then to Glenwood University. As they ended the call, neither woman could have predicted just how dramatically events would unfold the following day, or how a single admissions decision would ultimately transform educational access for rural students across the entire state. At dawn the next morning, Maya rose, as she always did, to help with early farm chores before school. The routine of feeding animals and checking irrigation systems provided a comforting normalcy after the previous day's turmoil. Physical work had always cleared her mind, allowing solutions to percolate through the background of her thoughts while her hands stayed busy. By the time she returned to the house for breakfast, she had resolved to fight Hargrove's decision through every available channel. If Glenwood wouldn't recognize her worth, she would make it impossible for them to ignore her contributions to agricultural science. The path forward might be different than she had planned, but she refused to let one man's prejudice define her future. Thomas was at the kitchen table reviewing their harvest projections when Maya came in, her determination evident in her squared shoulders and focused expression. "You've made a decision," he observed, recognizing the look she got when a problem was solved. Maya nodded, pouring herself coffee. "I'm going to challenge Hargrove's decision formally, and if that doesn't work, I'll apply to State University's program. Their facilities aren't as advanced, but Professor Williams has already offered to mentor me based on my soil remediation work." Thomas studied his daughter proudly. "That's my girl. Never let someone else's limited vision determine your worth." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of vehicles on the gravel driveway. Unusual. For early morning, Thomas moved to the window, then froze in surprise. "Maya," he said slowly, "you'd better come see this." Maya joined her father at the window. 3 black SUVs with official flags were pulling up to their farmhouse. As they watched, men in suits emerged, scanning the property with the practiced efficiency of security personnel. Behind them, a tall woman in a tailored blazer stepped out, immediately recognizable from news broadcasts and public appearances. That's Governor Woodward," Maya whispered in disbelief. "What is the governor doing at our farm?" Before Thomas could respond, another familiar figure emerged from the second vehicle, Dr. Elena Garcia, Maya's longtime mentor, dressed in business attire rather than her usual lab coat. The two stood frozen by the window until a sharp knock at the door jolted them into action. Thomas smoothed his flannel shirt self-consciously, while Maya ran a hand through her hair, still messy from morning chores. When Thomas opened the door, he found himself face to face with the governor's chief of staff, a formidable woman whose professional demeanor couldn't quite mask her discomfort with farm surroundings. "Mr. Wilson, I'm Rebecca Chen, Chief of Staff. To Governor Woodward, the governor would like to speak with you and your daughter regarding Maya's university application and some related matters of educational policy." Thomas blinked, momentarily speechless before finding his voice. "Of course, please come in. Our home is, well, it's a working farmhouse, not what you're used to, I'm sure." Rebecca Chen's expression softened slightly. "The governor grew up on a dairy farm, Mr. Wilson. She'll feel right at home." As the officials entered the modest farmhouse kitchen, with its well-worn furniture and walls covered in agricultural charts alongside family photos, Governor Elaine Woodward moved with the easy comfort of someone returning to familiar territory. She extended her hand to Thomas. "Mr. Wilson, thank you for receiving us without notice. I'm Elaine Woodward, though I suspect you already know that." Her warm smile included Maya, as she continued, "And you must be Maya. Dr. Garcia has told me remarkable things about your work." Maya shook the governor's hand, still struggling to process the surreal situation. "Thank you, Governor. It's an honor to meet you, but I don't understand why I'm here." Governor Woodward completed her thought. "I'm here because what's happening to you represents a systemic issue affecting rural students across our state, one that my administration is committed to addressing. But I'm also here because your soil remediation technique may be exactly what our new agricultural innovation initiative needs." At Maya's startled expression, Dr. Garcia stepped forward. "I hope you don't mind that I shared your research with the governor, Maya. When I received your email last night about the situation with Director Hargrove, I recognized that 2 separate issues I care deeply about were converging. Nay, we'd like to hear directly from you about your experience with Glenwood's admissions process," the governor added, accepting the mug of coffee Thomas hastily offered. "And afterward, I'd very much like to see this famous converted tool shed laboratory of yours that's producing research that puts some of our state-funded facilities to shame." As the kitchen filled with the governor's staff setting up impromptu workspace on the family's oak table, Maya found herself seated across from one of the most powerful people in the state, recounting her meeting with Director Hargrove in detail. The governor listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but mostly allowing Maya to tell her story, uninterrupted. When Maya finished, Governor Woodward exchanged a meaningful glance with Dr. Garcia before addressing Maya directly. What you've experienced is unfortunately not an isolated incident. My office has been gathering data on discrepancies in how elite institutions evaluate rural and urban students with comparable achievements. Glenwood University, despite receiving significant state funding, has shown particularly troubling patterns. Rebecca Chen handed the governor a tablet displaying a series of graphs. Over the past 5 years, rural students with standardized test scores and GPAs in the top percentiles have been systematically underrepresented in Glenwood's selective programs, particularly in STEM fields. The disparity cannot be explained by any objective criteria. The issue, Dr. Garcia added, is that subjective measures like leadership potential and cultural fit become proxies for discriminating against students from rural and working-class backgrounds. Director Hargrove has been particularly blatant in this approach. Governor Woodward set down her coffee mug decisively. Maya, your situation has brought these statistics to life in a way that can no longer be ignored. Especially since your work on sustainable agriculture aligns perfectly with our new initiative. Thomas, who had been quietly listening, finally spoke up. Governor, we appreciate your concern, but what exactly does this mean for Maya? She deserves to be in that honors program based on her own merits. I couldn't agree more, Mr. Wilson, the governor replied, and by this afternoon Glenwood University will agree as well. But this visit isn't just about correcting one admissions decision. It's about ensuring that talented young people from rural communities across our state have equal access to educational opportunities. Maya looked between the governor and her mentor, hope mingling with determination. What happens now? Governor Woodward smiled, the expression of someone ready for a productive confrontation. Now, Maya, after you show me this impressive laboratory of yours, we're going to pay a visit to Glenwood University. I believe Director Hargrove and President Matthews need a refresher course on the conditions attached to their state funding, particularly the non-discrimination requirements they seem to have overlooked. As the governor's entourage prepared to tour Maya's converted tool shed, none of them could have anticipated how this morning's unexpected visit would catalyze a transformation in educational access that would eventually extend far beyond one farmer's daughter and one elite university. The seeds of change had been planted, and like the crops that surrounded them, were ready to flourish given the right conditions. That morning marked the beginning of a journey that would not only secure Maya's rightful place in Glenwood's honors program, but would ultimately reshape the relationship between rural communities and elite educational institutions across the state. And it all began with a farmer's daughter who refused to accept that her roots somehow made her less worthy of academic excellence. Maya's makeshift laboratory left Governor Woodward momentarily speechless. The converted tool shed, which Maya's father had insulated and wired with his own hands, housed an impressive array of equipment that told a story of ingenuity and determination. Recycled glass containers served as growth chambers. A modified refrigerator functioned as a climate-controlled testing environment, and a computer assembled from salvaged parts ran sophisticated analysis software that Maya had modified for her specific research needs. You built all this yourself? This, the governor asked, examining a handcrafted soil separation system constructed from repurposed kitchen equipment and irrigation parts. Most of it, Maya replied, growing more confident as she moved through the familiar space. Dad helped with the electrical work and structural modifications. The centrifuge came from a university surplus sale. It was damaged, but we fixed it. The microscope was a gift from Dr. Garcia when her lab upgraded their equipment. Dr. Garcia smiled, remembering the old microscope. I knew it would be put to better use here than gathering dust in storage. I had no idea you'd build an entire lab around it. As Maya demonstrated her soil remediation process, walking the governor through each stage from microbial cultivation to field application, the visitors exchanged impressed glances. What Maya had accomplished with limited resources wasn't just surprising, it was extraordinary. This bacterial cultivation method, Governor Woodward said, examining a tray of samples, it's similar to the approach being explored at the State Agricultural Research Center, isn't it? Similar foundation, different application, Maya explained, warming to her subject. Their approach focuses on single crop applications in controlled environments. I've adapted it for mixed crop organic farming in variable conditions. The key innovation is this feedback mechanism that allows the bacterial colonies to adapt to changing soil conditions. She pulled up data charts on her computer, displaying side-by-side comparisons of treated and untreated soil samples. We've implemented test patches across our farm for 3 growing seasons now. The treated areas show consistent yield increases between 35–42%, while reducing fertilizer requirements by nearly 60%. Governor Woodward studied the data with growing excitement. And this works across different soil types? That's what makes it scalable, Maya nodded. We've tested it on 5 different soil compositions so far. The bacterial mix needs adjustment for each type, but the core process remains consistent. I've documented the adaptation protocols extensively. Dr. Garcia stepped forward, adding, context for the governor's benefit. What Maya isn't mentioning is that commercial agricultural companies have been trying to develop similar systems for years, with research budgets in the millions. None have achieved results this consistent across variable conditions. The governor turned to Maya with newfound respect. Maya, do you understand the potential impact of what you've developed here? If this can be implemented at scale, it could transform agricultural sustainability throughout our state's diverse growing regions. Maya's cheeks flushed with pride, but her expression remained serious. That's always been the goal. Sustainable farming isn't just about environmental protection, it's about economic survival for family farms like ours. If we can produce more while spending less on inputs, small farms can remain viable even when competing with industrial operations. Governor Woodward nodded thoughtfully. This perspective, understanding both the science and the practical realities of farming, is precisely what's missing from many academic agricultural programs. She turned to her chief of staff. Rebecca, add Maya's research to the briefing. Materials for next week's Agricultural Innovation Initiative announcement. I want our team to explore implementation partnerships immediately. As they exited the laboratory, Thomas Wilson was waiting outside. The governor approached him with genuine admiration. Mr. Wilson, you've raised a remarkable daughter. Her achievements speak to both her individual brilliance and the values you've instilled in her. Thomas smiled, pride evident in his weathered face. Maya's always had a special way of seeing the world, finding connections between things most people treat as separate. Eleanor and I just tried to give her room to grow. That modesty must be where she gets it from, Governor Woodward replied warmly. What she's accomplished in that converted shed would be impressive in a fully funded university lab. Thomas's expression grew more serious. That's what makes this situation with Glenwood so infuriating. They claim to value agricultural innovation, but they can't recognize it when it comes from someone like Maya. That's about to change, the governor assured him. My visit to Glenwood today isn't just about Maya, it's about addressing a systemic problem. But sometimes it takes a specific case to illuminate larger issues. As the governor's entourage prepared to depart for Glenwood University, Maya found herself pulled aside by Dr. Garcia. "Maya, I need to prepare you for what happens next," her mentor said quietly. "When we arrive at Glenwood, things might get intense. The governor doesn't make these kinds of interventions lightly, and there will be resistance." Maya nodded, anxiety mingling with determination. "I can handle it." "I know you can," Dr. Garcia smiled. "Just remember, this isn't just about your admission anymore. You've become the catalyst for a much-needed conversation about who belongs in elite academic spaces. Whatever happens today will have implications for many students who come after you." Maya straightened her shoulders, thinking of future farm kids with dreams as big as hers. "Then we'd better make it count." As the convoy of black SUVs rolled away from Silver Creek Farm, Thomas and Eleanor stood on the porch, watching until the vehicles disappeared down the rural road. Eleanor slipped her hand into her husband's, both processing the surreal morning that had transformed their kitchen into an impromptu governor's office. "Did that really just happen?" Eleanor asked, still stunned by the turn of events. Thomas squeezed her hand. "Our daughter just impressed the governor of the entire state. With research she did in a converted tool shed, I'd say anything is possible now." Inside the lead SUV, Governor Woodward was on a video call with her education policy team, the rural landscape of the Wilson farm visible through the windows behind her. "I want complete data on Glenwood's admissions patterns for the past 5 years, broken down by geographic region, socioeconomic indicators, and program acceptance rates," she instructed. "And I need the exact language of their state funding provisions regarding equal access and non-discrimination. Have it ready before we arrive." As her staff scrambled to compile the requested information, the governor turned to Maya, who sat quietly watching the familiar countryside roll by. "Tell me, Maya, what did you hope to accomplish at Glenwood, beyond the obvious educational benefits?" Maya considered the question carefully. Their agricultural sciences honors program connects students directly with policymakers and industry leaders. "I wanted to bridge the gap between cutting-edge research and practical implementation for family farms. Most agricultural innovation benefits large operations first, with small farms as an afterthought. I wanted to help change that pattern." Governor Woodward nodded approvingly. "That perspective is precisely what those conversations need. Agricultural policy, too, often happens without input from the people who actually work the land." Maya looked out at the passing fields, many owned by families she had known her entire life. These aren't just statistics or economic units, they're communities with generations of knowledge and commitment to the land. When we lose family farms, we lose that knowledge too. The governor studied Maya with growing respect. This young woman didn't just possess scientific brilliance, she understood the human dimension of agricultural policy in ways many seasoned experts missed. "Maya, regardless of what happens with Glenwood today, I'd like to offer you a position on our Agricultural Innovation Advisory Council. We need voices like yours, informing state policy, people who understand both the science and the lived reality of farming communities." Maya's eyes widened in surprise. I'd be honored, Governor, but I'm only 18. The council includes representatives from various stakeholder groups, including young farmers. Your age is an asset, not a liability. You represent the future of agriculture in our state. As their conversation continued, Maya began to see how her personal setback had opened unexpected doors. The path ahead might look different than she had planned, but it could lead somewhere even more impactful. Meanwhile, at Glenwood University, an ordinary morning was unfolding with no hint of the disruption soon to arrive. Director Richard Hargrove was reviewing applications in his meticulously organized office, occasionally making notes on his assessment rubric. a system he had personally developed to quantify the unquantifiable aspects of fit for Glenwood's elite programs. His assistant knocked tentatively on his door. "Director Hargrove, President Matthews has called an emergency meeting of all department heads and admissions directors. His office says it's urgent." Hargrove frowned, checking his watch. "Did they specify what this concerns?" "No, sir. Just that attendance is mandatory, and to bring all admissions files from the last admission cycle." His frown deepened. Emergency meetings were rare at Glenwood, an institution that prided itself on deliberate, unhurried decision-making. Bringing admissions files suggested some kind of audit or review, potentially concerning, but nothing that would threaten his carefully constructed system. After 2 decades managing admissions, Hargrove had become adept at justifying his decisions within the bounds of institutional policy, even when those decisions were driven by his personal biases about which students truly belonged at Glenwood. As Hargrove gathered his materials and made his way across the manicured campus to the administration building, he remained confident in his position. President Matthews had always supported his approach to maintaining Glenwood's standards and traditions, code words they both understood to mean preserving the university's particular social and cultural character. What Hargrove couldn't know was that President Matthews had received a call 30 minutes earlier that had shaken that support to its core. The governor's office had informed him of her imminent arrival to discuss serious concerns about discriminatory admission practices with specific reference to Maya Wilson's case. The governor's staff had requested all relevant admissions records be available for review and made it clear that significant state funding hung in the balance. President Matthews, a political pragmatist above all else, had immediately recognized the gravity of the situation. While he valued Glenwood's traditions, he valued its financial stability more, and crossing the governor during budget season would be institutional suicide. By the time Hargrove entered the president's conference room, he found an atmosphere of tense anticipation. Department heads and program directors sat around the large oak table, expressions ranging from confused to concerned. President Matthews stood at the head of the table, unusually grim. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Matthews began once everyone was seated. "I've just been informed that Governor Woodward will be arriving within the hour to discuss admissions practices, particularly as they relate to rural and agricultural students." A murmur ran through the assembled administrators. The governor rarely involved herself directly in university operations. Her personal intervention signaled something serious. "The governor's office has specifically mentioned concerns about the agricultural sciences honors program's recent admission decisions," Matthews continued, his gaze shifting meaningfully to Hargrove. "They've requested all files related to this year's applicants for review." Hargrove felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. While he had documented justifications for all his decisions, he knew certain patterns would become apparent under scrutiny, patterns he had always counted on no one examining too closely. "Surely the governor understands that admission decisions involve complex evaluations beyond simple metrics," Hargrove offered, trying to sound confident. "Our holistic review process considers factors that raw numbers cannot capture." Dr. Lydia Hernandez, Dean of Agricultural Sciences, fixed Hargrove with a pointed stare. "Richard, would those factors include systematically downgrading rural applicants regardless of their qualifications? Because I've raised concerns about that pattern for 3 consecutive admission cycles." Hargrove bristled. "I've always followed institutional guidelines for balanced admissions. We don't have time for this," President Matthews interrupted sharply. "The governor will be here soon, and we need to present a unified response. I want complete transparency. If mistakes were made, we acknowledge them and commit to corrective action. His gaze swept the room before settling on Hargrove. If anyone has implemented admission practices that could be construed as discriminatory, now is the time to disclose that information before the governor's office discovers it independently. The implied threat hung in the air. Matthews was offering one chance to get ahead of the situation before sacrificing whoever necessary to protect the institution. Hargrove weighed his options quickly. Full disclosure would mean admitting to years of subtle manipulation of the admissions process. Denial would be safer in the short term, but potentially catastrophic if the governor's investigation uncovered the patterns in his decision-making. There may have been some unintentional bias in how we evaluate non-traditional applicants, he admitted carefully. Our emphasis on certain types of leadership experience and extracurricular activities might inadvertently disadvantage rural students with different opportunity structures. President Matthews nodded, recognizing the deliberate understatement but accepting the partial admission as a starting point. Then we acknowledge that and commit to reforming our evaluation criteria. Dean Hernandez, could your department develop more equitable assessment guidelines for agricultural programs? Before Dr. Hernandez could respond, the door opened and President Matthews' assistant entered, her expression tense. Sir, Governor Woodward has arrived with her staff. They're also accompanied by Dr. Elena Garcia and a student named Maya Wilson. The name sent a visible jolt through Hargrove. Maya Wilson, the farmer's daughter, he had so dismissively removed from the honors program just yesterday. Somehow, in less than 24 hours, this rural student had escalated her grievance to the highest level of state government. President Matthews straightened his tie, preparing for diplomatic battle. Show them in, please, and everyone. Remember that state appropriations for our expansion projects are still pending legislative approval. The message was clear. Whatever personal opinions or prejudices might exist in the room, institutional survival took precedence. When Governor Woodward entered the conference room, her presence immediately commanded attention. Though not physically imposing, she carried herself with the quiet authority of someone accustomed to making consequential decisions. Behind her came Rebecca Chen and several staff members carrying tablets and folders, followed by Dr. Garcia and finally Maya Wilson. Maya's entrance created a subtle ripple of reaction around the table. Many of the administrators had never met her, knowing her only as a name on an application. Seeing the poised young woman in person, looking remarkably composed despite the extraordinary circumstances, forced a confrontation between their abstract notions of rural applicants and the reality of this specific student. President Matthews stepped forward, extending his hand. Governor Woodward, welcome to Glenwood University. We're honored by your visit, albeit surprised by its urgency. Thank you, President Matthews, the governor replied, her tone professional, but cool. I apologize for the lack of notice, but the matter at hand requires immediate attention. Her gaze swept the room, lingering briefly on Hargrove before returning to Matthews. I appreciate you assembling your leadership team so quickly. As introductions proceeded around the table, Maya found herself directly across from Director Hargrove, whose carefully neutral expression couldn't quite mask his discomfort. Dr. Garcia stood supportively at Maya's side, a physical reminder that the young woman didn't face this intimidating gathering alone. Once everyone was seated, Governor Woodward opened a folder provided by her chief of staff. Let me be direct about why I'm here, she began. My office has been collecting data on educational access disparities across our state, with particular attention to how elite institutions evaluate rural and non-traditional students. Yesterday, a situation came to my attention that crystallizes concerns we've been tracking for some time. She gestured toward Maya. Ms. Wilson was initially accepted to Glenwood's Agricultural Sciences Honours Program based on her exceptional academic record and groundbreaking research in sustainable agriculture, work that aligns directly with state priorities for agricultural innovation. Yesterday, that acceptance was rescinded by Director Hargrove with explicit reference to her rural background as a disqualifying factor. President Matthews turned to Hargrove with barely concealed alarm. "Is this accurate, Richard?" Before Hargrove could formulate a response, the governor continued, "What makes this case particularly concerning is that it appears to be part of a pattern. My staff has analyzed Glenwood's admissions data for the past 5 years, focusing on your most selective programs. Rebecca Chen distributed graphs to everyone at the table. As you can see, acceptance rates for rural applicants with identical or superior academic qualifications are consistently lower than for their urban and suburban counterparts. The disparity cannot be explained by any objective criteria." Dean Hernandez studied the data with growing indignation. "These patterns align exactly with concerns I've raised in admissions committee meetings for years." Director Hargrove shifted uncomfortably. "Governor, with all due respect, admission decisions involve nuanced evaluations of potential that cannot be reduced to simple statistics. Our process considers leadership qualities, communication skills, and other factors that contribute to student success." "Interesting criteria," the governor replied evenly. "This morning, I visited Ms. Wilson's home and saw firsthand the laboratory she built to conduct her research sophisticated enough to be published in peer-reviewed journals. I observed her articulate complex scientific concepts with remarkable clarity and demonstrate leadership in developing innovations that could benefit our entire agricultural sector." She leaned forward, fixing Hargrove with a penetrating stare. "So I find myself wondering which leadership qualities or communication skills she lacks, or whether the real issue is something else entirely. Perhaps assumptions about who belongs in elite academic spaces based on where they come from, rather than what they can contribute." The silence that followed was deafening. Several administrators studied the data with growing concern, while others exchanged uncomfortable glances. President Matthews, ever the political strategist, recognized that the situation required not just damage control, but meaningful concession. "Governor Woodward, these patterns are deeply troubling and demand immediate attention," he said, careful to position himself as part of the solution rather than the problem. "I assure you that any admission practices inconsistent with our commitment to equal opportunity will be reformed immediately." Maya, who had remained silent throughout this exchange, finally spoke. Her voice was steady despite the intimidating setting. "With respect, President Matthews, the issue isn't just about my individual case. Every year, talented students from rural backgrounds are overlooked or underestimated because of where they come from. Many don't have advocates to help them challenge these decisions. They simply accept rejection as confirmation that they don't belong in places like Glenwood." Her words hung in the air, their simple truth impossible to dismiss. Dr. Garcia placed a supportive hand on Maya's shoulder, visible pride in her expression. Governor Woodward nodded approvingly before addressing the room again. "Ms. Wilson's point is precisely why this conversation extends beyond a single admission decision. Glenwood University receives substantial state funding that comes with explicit non-discrimination requirements and commitments to serve all state residents equitably." The implied threat was unmistakable. President Matthews, reading the room with political acumen, made a strategic decision. "Governor, I propose we take immediate corrective action. First, Ms. Wilson's admission to the Agricultural Sciences Honours Program will be reinstated, effective immediately. He turned to Maya directly. On behalf of Glenwood University, I apologize for this unwarranted reversal of your acceptance. He continued, addressing the governor again. Second, I will establish a task force, including Dr. Garcia and Dean Hernandez, to conduct a comprehensive review of our admissions criteria and processes, with particular attention to eliminating barriers for rural and non-traditional students. Director Hargrove paled visibly. President Matthews, such sweeping changes should be carefully considered. And third, Matthews continued, ignoring Hargrove's objection, we will develop a Rural Innovation Scholars Program specifically designed to identify and support talented students from agricultural communities who, like Ms. Wilson, are developing solutions to real-world challenges faced by our state's farming industry. The governor considered this proposal, her expression thoughtful. These are positive first steps, President Matthews. However, meaningful change requires accountability. My office will require regular reports on your progress, including data on rural student recruitment, admission, and retention. She turned to Maya. What do you think, Ms. Wilson? Would these measures address the concerns that brought us here today? Maya considered the question carefully, aware that her response carried weight beyond her personal situation. The proposed changes sound promising, especially the Rural Innovation Scholars Program. But real change will depend on implementation, whether Glenwood truly values diverse perspectives or just wants to appear that it does. Her candor earned appreciative nods from several administrators, including Dean Hernandez. President Matthews, recognizing Maya's legitimate skepticism, made one final commitment. Ms. Wilson raises a valid concern about meaningful implementation versus superficial change. To demonstrate our seriousness, I propose that the task force include current rural students and representatives from farming communities, people with lived experience of the barriers we're trying to address. This addition visibly impressed the governor. That's an excellent suggestion, President Matthews. Community participation will be essential for authentic reform. As the meeting continued, outlining specific timelines and accountability measures, Maya observed the transformation happening before her eyes. What had begun as a personal injustice was catalyzing institutional change that could benefit countless students in years to come. Director Hargrove sat silently, his influence visibly diminishing with each passing minute. The power dynamics in the room had shifted irrevocably, and his approach to admissions, once unquestioned, was now exposed as the discriminatory practice. It had always been. By the meeting's conclusion, Maya had not only secured her place in the honors program, but had become an architect of systemic change at Glenwood University. As the participants prepared to leave, Dean Hernandez approached her directly. Ms. Wilson, your soil remediation research is genuinely groundbreaking. I'd like to discuss integrating your work with our department's sustainable agriculture initiatives. Your perspective would be invaluable. This professional recognition, treating her as a colleague rather than merely a student, represented exactly the respect Maya had sought all along. Not special treatment, but acknowledgement of her legitimate contributions to agricultural science. As Maya left the conference room alongside Dr. Garcia, she felt a complex mix of emotions, vindication, certainly, but also a growing awareness of the responsibility that came with her unexpected influence. The path ahead would require not just scientific rigor, but moral courage to ensure that the promised changes materialized for other students like her. What had begun as a fight for her rightful place at Glenwood had evolved into something far more significant, a challenge to rethink who belonged in spaces of academic privilege and a chance to bridge the divide between theoretical research and practical agricultural innovation. The stakes had grown beyond her personal academic future to encompass the future of rural education access across the entire state. It was a responsibility Maya hadn't sought, but one she now embraced with the same determination that had driven her scientific innovation. One converted tool shed, one experiment, one problem solved at a time. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Glenwood University's historic quadrangle as Maya Wilson and Dr. Garcia emerged from the administration building. Campus life continued around them, students hurrying to classes, professors engaged in animated discussions, all unaware of the institutional earthquake that had just occurred inside the conference room. Maya paused at the top of the marble steps, taking a deep breath as the magnitude of what had transpired began to sink in. "Are you all right?" Dr. Garcia asked, studying her former protégé with concern. Maya nodded slowly. "It's just overwhelming. Yesterday I was being told I didn't belong here. Today the university president is apologizing to me in front of the governor." She gestured toward the sprawling campus. "All of this feels surreal." "Get used to it," Dr. Garcia smiled. "You've stepped into a larger arena, Maya. Your voice matters now in ways you couldn't have anticipated." As they descended the steps, Governor Woodward approached with her chief of staff. "Maya, I need to return to the Capitol for an afternoon session with legislative leaders, but I wanted to check in before leaving. How are you processing everything?" "Still absorbing it all, Governor," Maya admitted. "Thank you for your intervention. I know this wasn't just about me." "No, it wasn't." The governor agreed, but sometimes it takes an individual case to illuminate systemic problems. Your situation provided the perfect catalyst for changes we've been wanting to implement for years. Rebecca Chen consulted her tablet. "Governor, we need to leave in 5 minutes to make your 3 p.m. meeting." Governor Woodward nodded before turning back to Maya. "I meant what I said about the Agricultural Innovation Advisory Council. We meet monthly, with the next session scheduled for 2 weeks from today. My office will send you the details." She extended her hand. "Congratulations, Maya. You've earned your place here. Never doubt that." As the governor departed with her entourage, Maya turned to Dr. Garcia. "What happens now?" "Now comes the real work," Dr. Garcia replied. "Winning admission was just the beginning. Transforming institutional culture, that's the marathon ahead." Before Maya could respond, her phone chimed with an incoming message. "It's my parents," she said, checking the screen. "They're anxious for an update." "Go call them," Dr. Garcia encouraged. "Then come by my office. We should discuss your research integration with the department. This is your moment, Maya. Time to make the most of it." As Dr. Garcia headed toward the Agricultural Sciences building, Maya found a quiet bench beneath a towering oak tree to call her parents. Thomas and Eleanor answered immediately, their worried faces filling the screen. "Maya, what happened? Are you okay?" Eleanor asked anxiously. "Better than okay," Maya assured them, unable to suppress her smile. "The governor basically forced Glenwood to reinstate me in the honors program. But it became so much more than that. They're creating an entire new scholarship program for rural students and revamping their admissions process." She recounted the meeting highlights, watching her parents' expressions shift from concern to astonishment to pride. "That's my girl," Thomas said finally, his voice thick with emotion. "Standing your ground not just for yourself, but for every farm kid who deserves a fair shot." The governor also appointed me to the state's Agricultural Innovation Advisory Council, Maya added, still hardly believing it herself. "The Advisory Council?" Eleanor's eyes widened. "Maya, that's where agricultural policy decisions get shaped before legislation. That's an incredible opportunity." As they continued talking, Maya noticed a group of students approaching her. "Bench." She recognized them from the Agricultural Sciences Program orientation she had attended before Director Hargrove's reversal of her admission. "I should go, Mom and Dad. Some classmates are here. I'll call you tonight with more details." After ending the call, Maya looked up at the approaching students with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. A tall young woman with short dark hair stepped forward. "You're Maya Wilson, right? I'm Zoe Chen. We met briefly at orientation." She gestured to the others. "This is Tyler, Marcus, and Layla. We're all in the Ag Sciences Honors cohort." Maya stood, unsure what to expect. "Yes, I remember. Nice to see you again." "Word travels fast around here," Zoe continued. "We heard about what happened with Hargrove and the governor's visit. Is it true they're overhauling the entire admissions system because of you?" Maya shifted uncomfortably. "Not because of me, exactly. My situation just highlighted problems that were already there." Marcus, a lanky student with an enthusiastic demeanor, stepped forward. "Whatever the case, it's about time someone challenged Hargrove. The man's been gatekeeping the program for years." "We actually came to invite you to join us," Layla added. "We're having a study group tonight to prepare for Professor Winter's first project. Your soil remediation research is basically legendary, and we could use your perspective." The genuine collegial respect in their invitation took Maya by surprise. These weren't students viewing her as an outsider or a charity case. They recognized her as a peer with valuable expertise to contribute. "I'd like that," Maya replied, feeling another piece of her old uncertainty fall away. "What time and where?" As they exchanged details, Maya realized something significant was happening. She was being integrated into the academic community based on her merits, exactly what she had wanted all along. Not special treatment, not tokenism, but genuine academic citizenship. Later that afternoon, Maya sat in Dr. Garcia's lab, surrounded by equipment she had only dreamed of accessing. The state-of-the-art facility made her converted tool shed look primitive by comparison, though she felt a surge of pride remembering the governor's admiration for what she had accomplished with limited resources. "Your bacterial culture development protocol is impressive," Dr. Garcia said, reviewing Maya's research notes on her computer. "Particularly this adaptive feedback mechanism. Have you considered applications beyond soil remediation?" "I've been experimenting with targeted pest resistance," Maya admitted. "The same microbial communities that enhance nutrient absorption can be modified to repel specific insect species without harmful pesticides. It's early stage, but the preliminary results are promising." Dr. Garcia looked up with new interest. "That's exactly the direction our department's Sustainable Agriculture Initiative is exploring. Professor Winters has grant funding for pest management alternatives, but the research team has been struggling with microbial stability in field conditions. That's where my approach differs," Maya explained, warming to the subject. "Most lab-developed solutions fail in actual field implementation because they're designed under controlled conditions. I started with field variables as constants in my model, not as problematic factors to eliminate." As their discussion continued, the dynamic between them evolved subtly, no longer mentor and student, but increasingly colleagues discussing shared research interests. Dr. Garcia posed questions that pushed Maya's thinking, while Maya offered practical insights that challenged some of the department's theoretical assumptions. "Maya," Dr. Garcia said finally, leaning back in her chair, "I'd like to propose something. Professor Winters and I are co-leading a major research project on sustainable farming practices funded by the National Agricultural Innovation Foundation. We need someone who understands both the microbiology and the practical farming applications. Would you consider joining the research team?" Maya's eyes widened. "As a first-year undergraduate." "As a researcher with unique expertise," Dr. Garcia corrected. "Your status as a student is secondary to what you can contribute. The position includes a stipend that would supplement your scholarship." The offer represented everything Maya had hoped for from Glenwood, recognition of her capabilities and the chance to do meaningful work that could benefit farming communities like her own. Yet something held her back from immediate acceptance. "Can I think about it?" she asked. "It's an incredible opportunity, but I want to make sure I can balance it with my coursework and the advisory council commitment." Dr. Garcia nodded approvingly. "Take the weekend. Thoughtful consideration of commitments is exactly the kind of judgment we need on the team." As Maya left the Agricultural Sciences building, the setting sun bathed Glenwood's Gothic architecture in golden light. Students crossed the quad in groups, laughing and talking, while professors carried stacks of books toward the library. For the first time, Maya didn't feel like an outsider observing this academic world from a distance. She was becoming part of its fabric, bringing her unique perspective to an institution that was finally learning to value it. Her phone buzzed. With a text from Zoe, "Study group moved to the Agricultural Sciences Lounge. Dean Hernandez ordered pizza for us. Apparently supporting rural students is the new priority around here. You coming?" Maya smiled, typing her reply, "On my way." 3 weeks later, Maya stood at the podium in Glenwood University's largest lecture hall, facing an audience that included students, faculty, state officials, and representatives from farming communities across the state. The Rural Educational Access Initiative, born from her confrontation with Director Hargrove and championed by Governor Woodward, was being officially launched, and Maya had been asked to deliver the keynote address. President Matthews had introduced her with elaborate praise, emphasizing her groundbreaking research and valuable perspective, the same qualities Director Hargrove had dismissed as irrelevant just weeks earlier. Hargrove himself was noticeably absent, having taken an extended leave following the internal review of admissions practices. As Maya looked out at the expectant faces, she felt a momentary flash of anxiety. Public speaking had never been her strongest skill, and the stakes felt enormous. Then she spotted her parents in the front row, her father's encouraging nod, and remembered the journey that had brought her to this moment. "Thank you, President Matthews," she began, her voice steady despite her nerves. "When I first applied to Glenwood University, I never imagined I'd be standing here today addressing such a distinguished audience. In fact, I was briefly told I didn't belong here at all." A murmur ran through the crowd. The story of Maya's rejection and the governor's intervention had become something of a legend on campus. "That experience taught me something important," Maya continued. "Belonging isn't something granted to us by institutions. It's something we claim through our contributions and perspective, and sometimes challenging the boundaries of belonging creates space for others to follow." She gestured toward the screens behind her, which displayed the key components of the new initiative: revised admissions criteria that recognized diverse forms of achievement, a scholarship program specifically for rural students, community partnerships with agricultural regions, and a mentorship network connecting rural applicants with current students. This initiative isn't about preferential treatment or lowering standards, Maya emphasized. It's about recognizing that excellence takes different forms in different contexts. The problem-solving skills developed on a working farm, the resourcefulness required by rural communities, the practical innovation that happens out of necessity, these aren't deficiencies to overcome. They're valuable perspectives that enrich academic discourse. As Maya outlined her vision for bridging the gap between academic research and agricultural practice, she noticed Dean Hernandez nodding enthusiastically in the front row. Several faculty members were taking notes, while Governor Woodward, seated beside President Matthews, watched with evident approval. The future of sustainable agriculture depends on combining theoretical knowledge with practical experience, Maya concluded. By opening Glenwood's doors wider to students from rural backgrounds, we're not just offering them opportunity, we're strengthening the university's ability to address real-world challenges. Everyone benefits when we expand our definition of who belongs in spaces like this. The applause that followed was genuine and enthusiastic. As Maya stepped away from the podium, Governor Woodward approached to shake her hand. Beautifully articulated, Maya. You've captured exactly why this initiative matters, not as charity, but as institutional strengthening. Thank you, Governor. I just spoke from experience. Sometimes personal experience makes the most compelling policy argument, the governor replied. By the way, your presentation at last week's Advisory Council meeting has generated significant interest. The state legislature's Agricultural Committee has requested a briefing on your soil remediation technique. Before Maya could respond, she was surrounded by people wanting to speak with her. Faculty members offering collaboration, rural students sharing their own experiences with admissions barriers, agricultural extension agents interested in implementing her techniques. The girl who had once been dismissed as just a farmer's daughter was now at the center of a conversation that could reshape both educational access and agricultural practice across the state. Hours later, when the crowds had dispersed, Maya found herself walking across campus with her parents. The evening was clear and cool, stars emerging in the darkening sky above Glenwood's historic buildings. I hardly recognize this place, Thomas remarked, looking around at the campus. 3 weeks ago, it felt like a fortress designed to keep people like us out. Now everyone's falling over themselves to hear your perspective. It's not just about me, Dad, Maya reminded him. The system needed changing, and my situation just happened to be the tipping point. Eleanor linked arms with her daughter. Don't diminish what you've accomplished, Maya. Yes, the timing and circumstances aligned, but your courage in challenging that initial rejection made this possible. Many students would have accepted Hargrove's decision as final. They paused. By a fountain in the central quad, its waters illuminated by soft lights. Maya reflected on the whirlwind weeks since the governor's intervention, her integration into the honors program, joining Professor Winter's research team, her growing influence on the advisory council, and most recently, the launch of the initiative that bore her implicit signature. You know what's strange, she said finally. If Director Hargrove hadn't rejected me from the honors program, none of this would have happened. I would have just been another student, not someone reshaping institutional policy. Thomas chuckled softly. Life's funny that way. Sometimes the doors slammed in our face led to better paths we wouldn't have found otherwise. Speaking of paths, Eleanor said, checking her watch, aren't you supposed to be meeting your study group at 7? It's nearly that now. Maya nodded. They're waiting in the Agricultural Sciences building. We're finalizing our research proposal for Professor Winter's Sustainable Farming Systems project. Then we won't keep you, Thomas said, hugging his daughter. Your mother and I are incredibly proud of you, Maya, not just for getting into Glenwood, but for transforming it into a better institution. As Maya headed toward her meeting, she reflected on her father's words about doors closing and new paths opening. The rejection that had seemed so devastating had catalyzed changes far more significant than simple admission to an honors program. By challenging the narrow definition of who belonged in elite academic spaces, she had created openings for countless rural students who would follow. The Agricultural Sciences Lounge was buzzing with activity when Maya arrived. Her study group had expanded in recent weeks to include students from diverse backgrounds, all drawn together by shared interest in sustainable agriculture innovation. Zoe had taken over a whiteboard, mapping out their research methodology, while Marcus and Layla debated the merits of different field testing approaches. There she is, Marcus called as Maya entered. The woman of the hour! That was some speech today. Maya set down her bag, slightly embarrassed by the attention. Thanks. It felt important to emphasize that this initiative benefits the university as much as the students. That's what made it effective, said a new voice from the corner. Maya turned to find Professor Winters observing their group with interest. The distinguished researcher rarely attended student study sessions, making his presence tonight significant. Professor Winters, Maya acknowledged, surprised. I didn't expect to see you here. I was intrigued by the research direction your group proposed last week, he explained. Particularly your integration of traditional farming knowledge with cutting-edge microbiome science. It's an approach we should have been exploring years ago. He gestured toward their whiteboard. I'd like to offer your team a dedicated research plot on the university's experimental farm to develop your ideas. With proper documentation, this could evolve into a publishable study. The offer represented unprecedented opportunity for undergraduate students. Research plots were typically reserved for graduate teams or faculty projects. We'd be honored, Maya responded, looking to her teammates for confirmation. Their excited nods reflected the collective recognition of this exceptional opportunity. As Professor Winters outlined the resources available to them, Maya marveled at how dramatically her position at Glenwood had changed. The university that had initially questioned her belonging now offered resources to develop her research approach. The transformation wasn't merely personal vindication. It represented institutional growth, an expansion of what excellence could look like. Later that evening, after the study group had developed their research plan well into the night, Maya found herself walking back to her residence hall under a sky brilliant with stars. The campus had a different feeling at night, peaceful, almost magical, with historic buildings illuminated by soft lighting and the fountain in the central quad catching moonlight on its rippling surface. She paused by the administration building, where just weeks ago she had faced off against Director Hargrove and the institutional barriers he represented. The memory no longer carried pain. Instead, it felt like an important milestone in a journey that was unfolding in unexpected ways. Her phone chimed with a message from Dr. Garcia. Governor just called. State legislature unanimously approved funding for the Rural Innovation Scholarship Program. First recipients will be admitted next fall. This is happening because of you, Maya. Never forget that. Maya stared at the message, the magnitude of its implications washing over her. 20 students each year would receive opportunities they might otherwise have been denied. 20 young people from backgrounds like hers would bring their unique perspectives to Glenwood, enriching the academic community while developing their own potential. And that was just the beginning. The admissions reforms, mentorship networks, and community partnerships would expand access far beyond the scholarship recipients. A system that had excluded generations of rural students was being reconstructed to recognize and value their contributions. As Maya continued toward her residence hall, she thought about the converted tool shed laboratory at Silver Creek Farm, where her journey had begun. The contrast between those humble beginnings and her current position at the center of state agricultural innovation policy was stark. Yet she recognized that the very limitations of that makeshift lab had fostered the resourcefulness and practical problem-solving that now made her perspective so valuable. The lesson seemed clear. Authentic excellence emerged not despite challenges, but because of them. The perspectives developed through overcoming obstacles, whether on a family farm or anywhere else, brought necessary diversity to institutions that too often mistook privilege for merit. Maya Wilson, once dismissed as just a farmer's daughter, had catalyzed institutional transformation that would benefit countless students who would never know her name. By refusing to accept rejection based on where she came from rather than what she could contribute, she had helped redefine belonging at one of the state's most prestigious institutions. As she reached her residence hall, Maya looked back at the illuminated campus stretching behind her. Glenwood University would never be the same, and neither would she. The path ahead would bring new challenges, certainly, but also unprecedented opportunities to bridge the divide between academic theory and practical application, between elite institutions and the communities they were meant to serve. The farmer's daughter had found her place not by conforming to institutional expectations, but by transforming them, proving that true belonging comes not from fitting into existing spaces, but from expanding them to include diverse perspectives that make the entire community stronger. And in that transformation lay a powerful truth. Sometimes the very qualities that systems of privilege dismiss as deficiencies are precisely the strengths needed to move those systems forward. Maya's rural background, once cited as a liability, had become her greatest contribution to an institution finally learning to value perspectives born outside its gates. The governor's convoy arriving at Silver Creek Farm had sparked more than individual vindication. It had initiated a reimagining of excellence itself, one that recognized that innovation flourishes at the intersection of diverse experiences, where theory meets practice and traditional knowledge meets cutting-edge science. In that reimagining lay hope, not just for Maya Wilson, but for every student whose potential had been underestimated because of where they came from rather than what they could become. 2 years later, morning sunlight streamed through the windows of the newly constructed Rural Innovation Center at Glenwood University, illuminating the bustling research space where students and faculty collaborated. At the center of this activity stood Maya Wilson, now a junior and student director of the center, guiding a group of visiting high school students from farming communities across the state. Before this center existed, Maya explained, gesturing toward the advanced laboratory equipment and collaborative workspaces, students interested in agricultural innovation often had to choose between practical experience on their family farms and academic research opportunities. Now we integrate both approaches, recognizing that the most effective solutions emerge when theoretical knowledge meets real-world application. A shy girl at the back of the group raised her hand. I'm from a small dairy farm in Riverdale County. My science teacher says I should apply to Glenwood, but I'm worried I won't fit in. Everyone seems so sophisticated here. Maya smiled, remembering her own doubts 2 years earlier. I had the exact same concern when I first came to Glenwood. I grew up on a farm not unlike yours, and I felt like an outsider initially. But what I've learned, what we've all learned, is that your unique perspective is precisely what makes you valuable here. She led the group to a wall displaying photographs of research projects conducted by rural students. See these innovations? They address challenges that many traditional researchers never even consider because they haven't lived those realities. Your experience on that dairy farm gives you insights that students from urban backgrounds simply don't have. As the tour continued through the center's various departments, Maya pointed out features specifically designed based on input from rural students. Equipment that could be repaired with commonly available parts, research protocols adaptable to diverse field conditions, and collaboration spaces that encourage the sharing of traditional agricultural knowledge alongside cutting-edge science. The Rural Innovation Scholarship that brought me to Glenwood now supports 40 students each year, Maya told the group as they gathered in the center's common area. But more importantly, the university's entire approach to agricultural science has evolved to recognize that excellence in this field requires diverse perspectives, including the practical wisdom developed on family farms like yours. After the tour concluded and the high school students departed with their chaperones, Dr. Garcia approached Maya with an appreciative smile. You never mentioned that this entire center exists largely because of you, she observed. These students have no idea they just got a tour from the catalyst who transformed Glenwood's approach to agricultural education. Maya shrugged, slightly embarrassed. That's not important for them to know. What matters is that they see themselves belonging here, that they recognize their own potential contributions. Spoken like a true leader, Dr. Garcia replied. Speaking of which, the governor's office called this morning. They want you to present the 2-year impact assessment of the Rural Educational Access Initiative at next month's State Education Summit. All the university presidents and state legislators will be there. Maya's eyes widened. That's a significant platform. And well-deserved, Dr. Garcia assured her. The data speaks for itself. Rural student enrollment up 42% across state universities, retention rates exceeding urban student averages, and research outputs from programs like ours demonstrating meaningful impact on agricultural sustainability. Your story launched all of this, Maya. Later that afternoon, Maya sat in the experimental fields behind the Rural Innovation Center, collecting soil samples from test plots, where her microbial enhancement system was being implemented at scale. The university's 200-acre agricultural research station, once dedicated primarily to conventional farming methods, now showcased diverse approaches to sustainable agriculture, with Maya's soil remediation technique as a centerpiece. Zoe Chen, now Maya's research partner and closest friend at Glenwood, knelt beside her, carefully labeling specimen containers. "Have you told your parents about the Education Summit presentation?" Zoe asked, sealing a sample vial. "Not yet," Maya admitted. "I wanted to wait until the presentation outline was approved. You know how my dad gets. He'll tell everyone in the county the minute he hears." Zoe laughed. "He's just proud of you, and rightfully so. Not every junior presents to the governor and state legislature." "Speaking of presentations," Maya said, changing the subject, "how did your meeting with the venture capital group go yesterday? Are they interested in funding the mobile soil testing unit?" Zoe's expression brightened. "Better than interested, they're committed. Full startup funding for initial production and a distribution partnership with the state agricultural cooperative. We can begin manufacturing next summer after graduation." The mobile soil testing unit had been Zoe and Maya's joint project for the past year, a portable, affordable device that allowed small farmers to conduct sophisticated soil analysis without sending samples to distant laboratories. The technology democratized access to crucial information that could significantly improve yields while reducing unnecessary chemical inputs. "That's incredible," Maya responded, genuinely excited. "From concept to market in less than 2 years, exactly what the Rural Innovation Center was designed to facilitate." As they continued collecting samples, Maya reflected on how her initial confrontation with Director Hargrove had catalyzed changes far beyond her individual academic journey. The Rural Educational Access Initiative had expanded to all state universities. The Rural Innovation Center had become a national model for integrating diverse knowledge systems in agricultural research, and students like her, from working farms and rural communities, were increasingly recognized as valuable contributors to academic discourse. That evening, Maya returned to her residence hall to find an unexpected visitor waiting in the lobby. Thomas Wilson, still wearing work clothes. From the farm, his weathered face breaking into a smile when he spotted his daughter. "Dad!" Maya exclaimed, rushing to embrace him. "What are you doing here? Is everything okay at home?" "Everything's fine," Thomas assured her. "I had to deliver some equipment to a farm near Lakeside, and I thought I'd surprise you. Your mother packed a basket of home-cooked food, said you probably needed a break from cafeteria meals." Maya led her father to the residence hall's common room, where they unpacked Eleanor's care package, still warm bread, preserved vegetables from their garden, and a freshly baked apple pie that immediately attracted envious glances from passing students. "So," Thomas began, his casual tone barely concealing his pride, "Dr. Garcia called the house today, mentioned something about you presenting at the State Education Summit?" Maya groaned good-naturedly. "I was going to tell you once. Everything was finalized." Maya Wilson, spokesperson for Rural Educational Access, Thomas mused, his expression growing more serious. "When I think about how close this all came to never happening, if you had just accepted Hargrove's rejection, if Dr. Garcia hadn't connected you with the governor." "I've thought about that too," Maya admitted, "how different things might have been, but you know what I've realized? The qualities that Hargrove saw as deficiencies, my background, my practical approach to problem solving, my connection to working agricultural communities, were exactly what Glenwood needed all along. They just didn't know it yet." Thomas nodded thoughtfully. "That's often how change happens. The very perspectives institutions resist are the ones that ultimately strengthen them." As they continued talking, several of Maya's classmates stopped by, drawn initially by the homemade food, but staying to engage with Thomas about farming practices and rural life. Maya observed with quiet satisfaction how easily her father conversed with these students, his practical knowledge earning their genuine respect. 2 years ago, such an interaction might have been marked by condescension or awkwardness. Now it represented the new normal at Glenwood, a recognition that knowledge came in many forms, all valuable in the right context. Later, as Maya walked her father to his truck, they passed the administration building where her confrontation with Director Hargrove had occurred. The space held different associations now. Hargrove had resigned shortly after the internal review of admissions practices, replaced by Dr. Lydia Hernandez, who had transformed the office into a model of inclusive excellence. "Remember how intimidated we felt walking in there that first time?" Thomas remarked, nodding toward the building. "Now you probably know it better than your own bedroom." Maya laughed. "The admissions committee meets there every week. I serve as the student representative for the Agricultural Sciences Department." Thomas shook his head in wonder. From rejected applicant to admissions committee member in 2 years, life takes unexpected turns. As they reached his truck, Thomas embraced his daughter one more time. "Your mother and I couldn't be prouder of what you've accomplished, Maya. Not just your research or your academic success, but the way you've created space for others to follow. That's a different kind of legacy altogether." After her father departed, Maya found herself walking across campus, reflecting on his words about legacy. The initial confrontation that had brought Governor Woodward to their farm had been about her individual admission to Glenwood's honors program. But the resulting transformation had expanded far beyond her personal journey, creating pathways for countless students who would never know the role she had played in opening those doors. The following morning, Maya met with Governor Woodward in her campus office to discuss the upcoming Education Summit presentation. The governor, now in her second term and nationally recognized for her innovative approach to rural economic development, had maintained a close mentoring relationship with Maya throughout the past 2 years. "The summit presentation needs to emphasize outcomes, not just intentions," Governor Woodward advised, reviewing Maya's draft outline. "Many diversity initiatives are strong on rhetoric, but weak on measurable impact. The Rural Educational Access Initiative is different precisely because we can demonstrate concrete results." Maya nodded, making notes. "I've included the comparative retention statistics and the economic impact projections from Dr. Hernandez's team. Should we also address the qualitative changes in campus culture?" "Absolutely," the governor confirmed. The numbers tell part of the story, but the institutional transformation runs deeper. Highlight some specific innovations that have emerged from rural student perspectives, like your soil remediation technique or Zoe's mobile testing unit. As they continued refining the presentation strategy, Maya realized how much she had grown under Governor Woodward's mentorship. The nervous freshman, who had once been intimidated by institutional power dynamics, now moved confidently in political and academic circles, translating between different worlds and advocating effectively for rural communities. "There's something else we should discuss," Governor Woodward said as their meeting concluded. "The White House Rural Prosperity Task Force has reached out regarding your soil remediation system. They're interested in implementing it as part of a national sustainable agriculture initiative. They've requested that you present to them in Washington next month." Maya stared at the governor in disbelief. "The White House? My research isn't ready for national implementation yet. We're still refining the adaptation protocols for different climate zones." "Which is exactly why they need your direct involvement," Governor Woodward countered. "This isn't about simply deploying a finished technology. It's about bringing your approach to agricultural innovation into national policy discussions. Your emphasis on adaptability to local conditions and integration of traditional farming knowledge with scientific research represents exactly the paradigm shift they're seeking." The prospect was simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating. Maya had grown comfortable advocating for change within Glenwood and even at the state level. But national agricultural policy represented an entirely different sphere of influence. "I'll need to think about this," she said carefully, "and discuss it with my research team." Governor Woodward nodded, respecting Maya's measured response. "Of course. But Maya, remember this. The limitations you perceive in your research are, actually, its greatest strengths. You've designed a system that acknowledges complexity and adaptation rather than imposing one-size-fits-all solutions. That's precisely what makes it valuable at a policy level." After leaving the governor's office, Maya headed to the experimental fields where her research team was collecting data on the latest round of soil samples. The university-funded project had expanded significantly over the past year, with test implementations now running on small farms throughout the state. As she approached the research plots, Maya noticed an unfamiliar figure walking with Zoe among the test rows. An elegantly dressed older woman taking notes as Zoe explained various aspects of the experimental design. When Zoe spotted Maya, she waved her over enthusiastically. "Maya, perfect timing. I'd like you to meet Dr. Isabella Montgomery, Director of the National Agricultural Sustainability Institute." Maya recognized the name immediately. Dr. Montgomery was a legendary figure in agricultural policy, having shaped sustainable farming initiatives across multiple presidential administrations. Her presence at Glenwood's experimental fields was significant. "Ms. Wilson," Dr. Montgomery greeted her, extending her hand. "I've been following your work with great interest. Your integration of microbial enhancement with traditional soil management practices represents exactly the kind of innovation our national agricultural system needs." "Thank you, Dr. Montgomery," Maya replied, surprised by the director's familiarity with her research. "We're still in the development phase, with much to refine before large-scale implementation." "That caution speaks well of your scientific integrity," Dr. Montgomery nodded approvingly. "But some elements of your approach are already implementation-ready, particularly your community-based testing model that engages small farmers as research partners rather than passive recipients of technology." As they walked through the experimental fields, Dr. Montgomery explained that she was conducting a nationwide assessment of innovative agricultural practices with potential for scaling through federal programs. Maya's soil remediation system had been identified as a high-priority candidate not just for its technical merits, but for its adaptive, community-centered implementation approach. The conventional model for agricultural innovation involves developing technologies in research, institutions, then pushing them out to farmers through extension services, Dr. Montgomery explained. Your model inverts that relationship, engaging farmers as knowledge holders and co-researchers from the beginning. The results speak for themselves in terms of adoption rates and effectiveness. Maya glanced at Zoe, who nodded encouragingly. That approach wasn't initially by design, Maya admitted. When I first developed the technique on our family farm, we couldn't afford commercial soil amendments, so we had to work with what was available locally. The community collaboration grew organically from necessity, which is precisely why it works, Dr. Montgomery replied. The most effective innovations often emerge from resource constraints that demand creativity. Top-down solutions rarely account for the complex realities of agricultural practice across diverse settings. The conversation continued as they toured the entire research facility, Dr. Montgomery asking insightful questions about adaptation protocols, community engagement strategies, and scaling considerations. By the time they reached the Rural Innovation Center, Maya realized they had been talking for nearly 3 hours, transitioning seamlessly from technical details to broader philosophical approaches to sustainable agriculture. I won't take more of your time today, Dr. Montgomery said as they concluded their tour, but I'd like to extend a formal invitation to present your work at the National Agricultural Policy Symposium in Washington next month. It coincides with the White House Rural Prosperity Task Force meeting that Governor Woodward mentioned to you. Maya hesitated, still processing the magnitude of these opportunities. I'm honored by the invitation, Dr. Montgomery. I'd like to consult with my research team and mentors before confirming. Of course, Dr. Montgomery replied, handing Maya her card. Take the time you need. But Ms. Wilson, if I may offer some perspective, your work represents a paradigm shift in how we approach agricultural innovation. That perspective is desperately needed in national policy conversations that too often proceed without input from those with practical farming experience. After Dr. Montgomery departed, Zoe turned to Maya with excited disbelief. Did that really just happen? First, the governor wants you to present to the state legislature, and now the director of the National Agricultural Sustainability Institute is inviting you to Washington. Maya leaned against the laboratory bench, feeling slightly overwhelmed. 2 years ago, I was fighting just to be admitted to Glenwood's honors program. Now, national agricultural policymakers want my input. It's surreal. It's a validation of everything you stand for, Zoe corrected. Your approach to agricultural innovation, your emphasis on respecting traditional farming knowledge, your insistence that rural perspectives matter, these aren't just nice ideals. They produce better outcomes. That's what they're responding to. Later that evening, Maya sat alone on the steps of the Rural Innovation Center, watching the sunset paint Glenwood's historic buildings in golden light. She thought about how far she had come from that devastating meeting in Director Hargrove's office, and how many others had benefited from the changes catalyzed by that initial injustice. The first cohort of rural innovation scholars was now in their senior year, preparing to graduate with honors and enter graduate programs or return to their communities with advanced knowledge and connections. The Rural Educational Access Initiative had expanded to every public university in the state, with early data showing improved outcomes not just for rural students, but for the institutions themselves. The innovations emerging from the Rural Innovation Center were addressing real challenges faced by farming communities, bridging the gap between academic research and practical application. And now, remarkably, Maya's approach to agricultural innovation was being considered for national implementation. The model developed on her family's modest farm, refined through Glenwood's resources, might soon inform policy decisions affecting millions of acres and thousands of farming communities across the country. As Maya contemplated these developments, Dr. Garcia emerged from the building and settled beside her on the steps. "Heavy thoughts?" she asked, noting Maya's contemplative expression. "Not heavy, just expansive," Maya replied. "I'm trying to process how we got from a farmer's daughter doesn't belong at Glenwood to potentially influencing national agricultural policy in just 2 years." Dr. Garcia smiled. "The path seems clear to me. You refused to accept rejection based on who you were rather than what you could contribute. That refusal catalyzed institutional change, which created space for others like you, whose perspectives generated innovations that proved so valuable they couldn't be ignored. Each step logically followed from the one before it." "When you put it that way, it sounds inevitable," Maya laughed softly. "Not inevitable," Dr. Garcia corrected, "but authentic. You never tried to be someone you weren't, Maya. You simply insisted that who you actually are, a farmer's daughter with unique insights and capabilities, deserved recognition and respect. The rest followed from that fundamental truth." As twilight deepened into evening, campus lights illuminated the pathways where students moved between buildings, their discussions and laughter carrying through the crisp air. 2 years ago, Maya had felt like an outsider on these paths, uncertain of her place at Glenwood. Now she moved through campus with the confidence of someone who had not just found belonging, but had helped redefine what belonging meant for an entire institution. The next morning, Maya called her parents to discuss the Washington invitation. As expected, Thomas and Eleanor were overjoyed at the opportunity, but encouraged Maya to make the decision based on her own goals, rather than external validation. "This platform would allow your research to impact farming communities nationwide," Eleanor noted. "But it also means stepping into a political arena where agricultural policy is often driven by industrial interests rather than family farm perspectives." "That's exactly why they need voices like yours," Thomas added. "Someone who understands both the science and the lived reality of small-scale agriculture. But it's a significant commitment, Maya. You need to be certain it aligns with your priorities." After careful consideration and consultation with her mentors and research team, Maya decided to accept both invitations, the State Education Summit presentation and the National Agricultural Policy Symposium in Washington. The opportunities aligned perfectly with her core mission of ensuring that rural perspectives informed both educational access and agricultural innovation policy. The day before her departure for the State Education Summit, Maya visited Silver Creek Farm for her monthly weekend at home. As she helped her father with the autumn harvest, she reflected on how her relationship with the farm had evolved. What had once been simply home had become a critical touchstone that kept her research grounded in practical reality, even as her influence expanded to national policy circles. "Remember when we converted that old tool shed into your first laboratory?" Thomas asked as they loaded freshly harvested organic vegetables into crates for the farmers' market. "Using salvaged equipment and supplies we could afford on a family farm budget?" Maya smiled at the memory. "That makeshift lab is what taught me the most important lesson about innovation, that limitations often drive creativity. When you can't just throw money and high-end equipment at a problem, you have to think differently." "That perspective is your greatest contribution," Thomas observed. "Not just the specific techniques you've developed, but the approach to problem-solving they represent. That's what these policymakers are responding to." As father and daughter continued working together, their conversation turned to the future of Silver Creek Farm and similar small agricultural operations across the country. Maya shared some of the policy proposals she planned to advocate for in Washington, initiatives that would support family farms transitioning to sustainable practices, incentives for community-based agricultural research, and educational pathways that valued rural knowledge alongside academic credentials. You know, when you were rejected from that honors program, I was furious about the injustice to you personally, Thomas admitted as they took a break beneath the shade of an old oak tree. I never imagined it would lead to transforming opportunities for rural students across the state, or to you potentially influencing national agricultural policy. I couldn't have imagined it either, Maya agreed. But looking back, it almost seems like that rejection was necessary, like the system needed to be challenged directly before it could change. Thomas nodded thoughtfully. Sometimes doors need to be forced open so others can walk through more easily. Your confrontation with Glenwood opened a door that was locked to generations of rural students before you. As twilight approached, Maya stood at the edge of the experimental fields where her research had begun, gazing out over land that had been in her family for 3 generations. The autumn sun cast long shadows across rows of crops that showcased her soil remediation technique in its original application. Here was the foundation of work that would soon be presented in the state capitol and in Washington, innovation born not in elite laboratories, but in the rich soil of a family farm, from the hands and mind of a farmer's daughter who had refused to accept that her background somehow made her less worthy of academic recognition. The journey that had begun with rejection and a governor's convoy arriving at their farm had expanded beyond personal vindication to create lasting institutional change. Maya Wilson, once deemed unsuitable for Glenwood's honors program because of her rural background, was now helping reshape both educational access and agricultural policy at state and national levels. As she walked back toward the farmhouse where her parents waited, Maya reflected on the profound lesson her journey had revealed. True excellence emerges not by excluding diverse perspectives, but by embracing them, not by narrowing definitions of merit, but by expanding them to recognize the unique contributions that arise from different life experiences. The farmer's daughter had not only found her rightful place at Glenwood University, she had helped transform the institution's understanding of its own purpose and potential, and in that transformation lay hope for countless students who would never have to hear that they didn't belong because of where they came from, only that their unique perspectives made them precisely what the academy and the world needed most. Up next, you got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.